So, yeah, we know that's a thing right now. People are going around tearing down statues and monuments and things like that. We want to talk a little bit about that tonight in a certain way that we think will be helpful to think about it. And I'm going to try to bring up it's probably not going to work.
I don't see anything.
No, not yet. Let me see. I may never come back if I get on into all this stuff.
And let me give kind of a plug before we get started into this thing as well. Go ahead. Joe and I both, we've talked about this. We are not experts in any way on what should or shouldn't or maybe should be coming up and down. We simply are having a discussion. Oh, there's a picture. We're simply having a discussion about this, and I think that might be helpful, at least maybe to get that conversation going. And we'll plug some pros and cons and that type of thing to go along with it. So
right.
So all right, Joe.
Yeah, first of all, William Penn was the founder of Pennsylvania, Quaker.
Right.
And I just thought, well, we'll throw him up here first because he is up here during this time and he's going, bring it on.
He's way up there.
Try to come and get me.
You've got to be pretty motivated to get up there.
Yeah, and he is in good shape. He's in good shape. But some of the other folks are not. And let me see if I can get that one up. That's kind of interesting, I think. And this one is a guy named Hans Christian Hague.
Hans Christian Hague.
And it's spelled H-E-G.
Okay.
All right. And you can see there used to be a statue on top of there.
I see that. Yeah.
Hans Christian Hague, Colonel, born in Norway, fell at Chickamauga, which is in Tennessee. And
right.
All right. So he was obviously from Norway, and he was a fierce opponent of slavery. He moved into Wisconsin, where he set up shop, and he was an early member of the anti-slavery Free Soil Party, which was a political party way back in the old days. He was a leader of, you'll like this term, the Wide Awakes.
The Wide Awakes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why they picked that name, but it was an anti-slavery militia, and they would go and chase down people that were coming across from the South to try to catch slaves that had escaped. So they were slave catchers, and this was a militia to go try to go defend the free slaves, and
right.
and arrest the slave catchers. So when the Civil War started, he immediately signed up to fight on behalf of the North, and he put together his own regiment of Norwegian-speaking folks who had come over, obviously, from Norway. And he was, he was a leader of his troops, and he was killed in the battle at Chickamauga. And so
I didn't even realize there were people from Norway that came over to fight.
Yeah. So a mob shows up and tears his statue down. Now, what's going on? I mean, why would they do that?
Well, I think that's the problem with mobs. Why I do not support mobs in any way. I support someone's right to be offended by things, but generally mobs, they don't really think about what something really is. They just see it. I guess this is in Tennessee. Is that correct?
This is in Wisconsin.
Oh, this is in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's where he lived.
Yeah. So, just to be tearing down and not even understand why you're tearing something down, that's a problem by itself.
And isn't that just the epitome of a mob action?
Sure it is. Sure
I mean,
is.
you know, that's why we call those the things that you know, that happen without any thought, rhyme, or reason. We usually attribute it to some kind of mob mentality.
Right.
And I hear people, you know, they try to justify something like that, saying, well, you know something, I mean, this is a bad time, and these people are angry at what's going on.
Right.
But what's the problem with that kind of justification? That you know, well, they're angry, they're, you know, about what's going on.
Right. Well, I think anger is not the best way to handle making a decision. You know, I was, I'm sure you were taught this too, you know, because I had a bad temper growing up. So, you know, I'm taught that you need to count to 10 before you decide you're going to say something.
Right.
You know, in other words, when you're angry, you generally don't make good decisions. And emotions, we have emotions. All of us have emotions, whether they're right or wrong. In fact, our emotions can be very justified, but if we don't think about how we're going to use those emotions, they can be turned into another type of injustice, and that's not what you want either.
Right. Well, you know, I heard a lot of explanations as far as that's concerned, which they thought were excuses when some people appeared before me, and you know, they tore up something, they, you know, stuck a knife in a tire to slash the tires, they broke a window, and well, Judge, I was angry. And you know,
Right.
you have to point out to them, well, you know, that's an explanation, but that's not an excuse.
Right.
For what you did. As you're pointing out, you know, normally you act on anger, it's not going to have a good outcome, although in certain situations your anger may be justified.
Yeah.
You know, you can
Absolutely.
have justifiable angry. And so, you know, if we all know all of this started with the death of George Floyd, and you know, you're justified when you watch what happened there to be angry.
Absolutely.
About that.
Yeah.
But to come and take this statute down and maybe think, you know, I'm thinking in a light most favorable, which isn't very favorable to the mob, that they see that he's in the Civil War, so maybe he was somehow on the side of slavery. Well, you can be angry about slavery, but slavery's abolished.
Right.
There's nothing to be angry about it anymore, because it's gone. It's gone. At least to be angry enough to tear down a statue to somebody that you don't even know probably who he is. Yeah. So the mobs are you know, are doing this, and you know, and it's kind of the same thing with some of the looting we see and all that kind of stuff. It's just a mob that gets together, and all of a sudden they're doing things that I'm sure some of those folks at a later time go, why did I do all that?
Right.
You know.
Well, you do wonder, you know, just for example, this particular statute, if you learn later on that this guy actually was against slavery, fought against people who tried to come into the North and and take former slaves and bring them back, you know, to me, you know, what is this really about? And I think, you know, I believe in a person's right to protest. I believe there's right ways in handling various things. I understand people get very angry. But then when you start, you know, you begin to even take down the very symbols that you're fighting for. You know, you do wonder, you know, if you come back and realize this is what we did. I mean, that would be hard.
If there's a statute you want to leave standing, that would be Hans Christian
That would be
Hague.
it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be Hans Christian Hague.
Absolutely.
And you know, as Christians, we read stories about mobs, even, you know, even in the biblical times, obviously. Most famous for us, of course, is the mob yelling, "Crucify him!"
Right.
And I think when we were talking earlier, you were kind of saying, Tracy, I'll bet a lot of those folks at a later time thought, what was I doing?
Yeah.
Being part of
Well,
that mob.
and not only that, I mean, if you read the gospel text, you find that the mob or the crowds were really being manipulated into, you know, getting alongside of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like you said, you know, these are people who really felt like, okay, this is a real threat to us as believers in God. For some, and, you know, of course you got the religious leaders. There was much more going on than that, but they were out there really inciting this kind of mob-like mentality. And you're right, they crucified the Son of God.
Yeah. And I'm sure some later on came to realize that was not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think you had a good point too. I think the mob usually has one or two people that are actually leading it or instigating it.
Right.
You know, a little group that's really kind of getting it going, instigating it, inciting the problem, and then off they go.
Right.
Off they go, and everything in their path is in danger. So so obviously, you know, it's okay. You may be justified in certain situations to be angry. The question is, or you're just angry.
Right.
And the real question is, what are you going to do with your anger?
Right.
You're going to tear up somebody else's property. You're going to loot a store. You're going to burn something down, or, I mean, there's a better way to do it, right?
Right. Well, let me just throw this out there, see your mentality as well. Okay, so one of the arguments is, let's just say some of the monuments that are offensive, that, you know, whether they were slave traders, slave owners, slave, you know, antagonists, whatever it may be. And these are things that people, especially, you know, your African Americans, and they have to walk by these things, and they've tried in a civil way to have things such as this removed, whether it be petitions or whether it be, you know, meeting with this, you know, their city councils or whatever it may be. So here they have been all these years, and these statues, they're still having to walk by these folks who had oppressed their very ancestors. So what would you say to someone who says, you know, we've tried this the civil way, and so now we're going to kind of take it on ourselves to bring this thing down?
Well, maybe we could save that question for a little later.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's do that.
But,
yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is here's because you'd have to go through, you know, okay, what do you do? And you kind of skipped ahead, like, okay, because you're assuming they tried to do the things they should do first, and then it didn't get through. So, you know, before you
we are talking about mobs. You're right.
Yes. Before you get to that point, you know, what is it that you should do? Right.
Right.
What is it you should do? Okay, well, you know, we live in a country with elected representatives, and probably wherever a statue is, there's either some corporation, some museum, some private entity, some public corporation, some government that has put that statue there.
Right.
And or monument or whatever it might be. And so, you know, the way you proceed is you go to your city council, your county commission, or your state government, or whoever, or the company that has the statute out front. And let's keep it to the government side first, because that's who we can vote on. And you make your request like you would anything else that you want the city council to do, or the county commission to do.
Right.
And kind of what we talked about a couple weeks ago about, you know, this is a good time to do some of these things. This is a good time to go do that, because there's not too many city councilmen or mayors that are going to say, yeah, we want to keep this guy who was all in favor of slavery on our front lawn. You're probably going to get a good reception from that.
Yeah, and I would say, just to go along with that, you know, I think we're seeing colleges, you know, states, cities who have become proactive in some things that, like, I don't know if anybody knew that. But it's, you know, they're all of a sudden they're hearing one thing or another, maybe one person even brings it out, and then suddenly, these things are being removed. So I do think you're right. I think we've come to a point, and when here in our country, people are really listening like never before.
Right.
And this is a good time.
And as usually happens, it'll go too far overboard one way or the other. It's the
Right.
pendulum swings back and forth, but that's democracy, and that's our country, and that's how it goes.
Right.
But I think, what we're pointing out is this is a local decision. If Vero
Right.
Beach has a statue that someone's objecting to, Vero Beach decides as a city council, as the people who vote, we're going to decide whether we want that or not.
Right.
It's not up to some mob to come in and decide, oh, you can't have this. That's just not how it works. That's not right. And you're shooting yourself in the foot if that's the way you do it.
Yeah,
because,
I think so.
Because the rest of the people in that community are going to say, I don't want those people in charge of my community. And you're just setting your own self back as far as that's concerned. And, what we probably need to talk about too, Tracy, is, okay, well, how do you evaluate whether a statute should be taken down or not?
Right.
Because, you see, not only do they want to take down the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was out and out racist, no questions asked his whole life. Right. They want to take down,
form the KKK. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they want to take down George Washington. They want to take down Abraham Lincoln. They want to take down Hans Christian Hague. There's got to be some way you evaluate certain things and be reasonable about what you're going to do. And we'll get to what I think ought to be the ones that I think ought to be taken down.
Okay.
But I'm not going to go out and try to pull it down. I'd have to get Trevor to help me do that.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. But you would go through it the right way. But so what are some things you think, how do you evaluate that? Let's take George Washington, who's, he was a slaveholder, but he was our first president.
Right.
So how do you look at something like that?
Yeah, and each person evaluates those things differently. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I do think a lot of things has to take place. I mean, I think you have to really do your homework, for one, because there's a lot of folks, just like those who yelled crucify him, they're later, saying Jesus is the King of all kings.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to, you really have to assess things. And I think the other thing is, and you and I talked about this before, and I thought this was something you brought up, which is, why is that statute there?
Right.
There are some statutes that are there for not good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some statutes, it's like, this is something this person has done, such as the father of our country kind of thing.
What's the purpose of the statute? Right.
Right.
Are we celebrating George Washington because he's a slaveholder? Or are we celebrating George Washington because he was a founding father, our first president, and set the pattern, for presidents? He had a chance to be king. We all read that story. He could have not stepped down after 2 terms. He could have ended up like Vladimir Putin and been president for life.
Right.
Kind of thing. But he set that pattern, and I mean, presidents followed that pattern of stepping down after 2 terms all the way up to FDR in the 1940s.
Right. Right.
That's what you're honoring. That's what you're remembering. That's what you want people to see and hear and listen about. So, you got purpose in talking that. You also are looking at the historical importance of who he is. And once again, you're talking about, a slave holder. Well, we've resolved that issue. I mean, that's not, we don't have,
right.
Yeah. And we don't have statutes, to help us, like, let's get back to slaveholding. They're not meant for that, obviously. So yeah, you have purpose. You got to look at their overall life work and what are you trying to honor there. So once again, going back to a Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a general for the Confederate Army, and there's nothing good to say about him.
Right.
Other than maybe he was a good general, maybe.
Right.
But you know, I have issues with a good general who is fighting against the United States of America.
Right.
I'm not looking for a statue of Osama bin Laden.
Right.
Because he was a good person, a good fighter against the United States of America.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that brings up my third picture. This may
I like
not
your
work.
pictures tonight. This is good. We need to do more pictures.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to get, but I need to be better prepared for this.
I'm hanging with you.
But I'm going to bring up Robert E. Lee because that's a closer question, because he did have after the Civil War, I guess you could say possibly he did realize that wasn't the right thing to do.
Right.
Or at least some people say that.
Right.
But
well, and the way I was, being down in the South. Oh, here we go. Go ahead. You want to make
go ahead.
comment?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, just saying, being down in the South, my whole life living in Alabama, we often heard a different story about these generals, not necessarily completely different stories, but what they were fighting for was states' rights rather than they're fighting to keep slavery.
You probably didn't have a little bust of Abraham Lincoln in your classroom.
Well, I can't remember having a bad thought about Abraham Lincoln, which is interesting. I'm not saying others didn't, but that was not, for whatever reason, that was not something. I can tell you this: I know a whole lot more about him than I do Jefferson Davis.
Yeah.
But as far as how we saw what this war was about, and this was, I don't blame my teachers. My teachers had textbooks that they were given as to, what was to be taught. But yeah, I mean, it was like, well, yeah, slavery was kind of in the mix of it, but that's really, really not what this whole thing was about.
Yeah. And
so when I think people in the South, when you hear talking about tearing down even Nathan Bedford, I think some will struggle with that because they felt like this was a great general, and what he did was he tried to fight for these states' rights.
Yeah, and I'll just strongly say it was about slavery.
Yes, I believe that too. I'm a big history guy, so
yeah. So it was about slavery. So here's Robert E. Lee. Here's why I'm all for taking that thing down right there.
Yeah.
And the reason why is there he is. He's on the horse. He's dressed in his army outfit, his Confederate Army outfit. That is honoring someone in rebellion against the government of the United States. Could care less about someone like that.
Well, and here's
and would not want to honor someone like that. And you've kind of pointed out why some people in the South may have that, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, growing up, you hear about Robert E. Lee, and he was spoken of in a very respectful way. A godly man, church-going guy, this type of thing. This, and maybe he was all those types of things. Of course, you still struggle with this idea of enslaving a human, but at the same time, this statue that we're looking at here, this is not him sitting down and praying, kneeling and praying. This is him mounted on a horse in his Civil War uniform. So, yes, I would agree that this type of thing, you're right. you know, and that's hard. I'm a Southerner,
Mhm.
and that's hard. Because, you know, I think people are very torn on those things, but the more and more I study and look into history and learn about some that were vilified, for example, General Grant was
Mhm.
vilified. And, you know, the more I learn about General Grant, I'm just even more impressed.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So what you see on that statute is his role as in rebellion to the government of the United States. And that's just
mhm,
not something to be honored. I mean, that just isn't. He made the wrong decision. Um, you know, he went on and was part of the founding of Washington and Lee University.
right,
You know, maybe if they wanted to have a statue of him in his professor outfit or whatever he wore there,
right,
that might be a
right.
different situation.
Yeah,
But
Marilyn Yergler, she writes in the comments, President Lincoln asked General Lee to command the Union forces.
he did.
Lee refused, stating, I will not raise my sword against my beloved Virginia or her people.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was his decision. And there was another general, I can't remember the name, same in the same position from Virginia, and he decided to go with the federal government.
go with the federal government.
Yeah,
Right,
and not be
right,
in rebellion. So, you know, now there are lesser. I mean, he had a leading role in that, and
right.
like I say, I just don't think it's, you know, that doesn't. I don't see the worth of that, of
Right.
honoring that part of it. I'm sure there's, you know, there's room for maybe a memorial for the Confederate soldiers, just the people who were following orders and doing the, you know, doing their best to fight, you know, what they thought was the
Right,
right thing and weren't necessarily slaveholders or anything
right.
else like that. They just were conscripted in and had to fight.
Yeah,
That's a difference. I mean,
yeah, yeah. You know, and I think museums are a wonderful place to
mhm,
display things. Look, I mean, my feelings on Hitler is not good,
mhm,
but I also love anytime I'm at a museum and I were to see, you know, things from, you know, replicas or maybe things that were taken from the SS or there's one museum in Alabama which is very well hidden, but they have an amazing Hitler collection, including his silver, you know, from and I mean just lots of things such as that. I'm fascinated to see those things, but now to honor to honor Hitler or to honor Nazi Germany,
mhm.
you know, no, I mean,
Yeah,
not even Germany will allow you to do that.
yeah. Well, I
So
mean, one of the
that's a
issues,
difference.
yeah, one of the issues we know is the lack of knowledge of history of a
Yeah.
lot of folks, and therefore they don't get the context of all those kind of things. I mean, if you really haven't paid attention to history, and let's go back to George Washington.
Right.
If you don't know much about George Washington, you can't get the context of why you would want to honor him
Right.
for what he did. If you don't know, you're just saying, you know, you're learning more and more about General Grant.
Right.
If you learn more and more about General Grant, you're going to really be impressed with his principles and what he was trying to do.
Well, and here's the thing about history, and I think this is one of the reasons I like it so much and sometimes dislike it,
Hmm.
is history is you're not, if you really and truly love history, you cannot manipulate what has happened. In other words, you may not like it, learning some things that of even people that you loved and appreciated at one time, but at the same time, it's there, it's a fact, and you have to look and observe and try to take all of those things in. So history is one of those things. It's not like we're living in the present. We're not sure how this thing's going to work out. History is one of those things that the more you learn, you know, you're going to know what the facts are,
Hmm.
and you may not like all the facts,
Right.
but it's history, and if you're true to history, then you have to do that.
Yeah. We probably ought to kind of finish up a little bit, take a few minutes with a little more Christian perspective.
Hmm.
And it goes kind of two ways, I think. And I'll let you go the one way, I'll go the other way. But um, you know, we have to show mercy and grace to the person we're evaluating. And by that, I mean, we have to recognize that we're all sinners, and we all have things that are flaws. We all know people could go back in our lives and point out something that was crazily wrong to do. And so you have to have some mercy and grace when you're evaluating somebody. We talked about Grant a little bit.
Right.
He marries a Southern girl whose father has slaves, and as for a marriage present, he gives them a slave.
Yeah.
And so for a while he has that slave, but he frees that slave.
Yeah.
Should he have done it right away? You can argue about that. Did he keep it the slave for 6 months, 8 months, and all? You have to have a little mercy and grace there, because you see his overall body of work, what he ended up doing. And as president, he sent in the military to try to take care of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
In the South,
right.
after the Civil War was ended. So you have to have a little mercy and grace. The other thing I think that you wanted to talk about too was you also have to recognize in some of these symbols and statues and monuments, what is the effect on maybe a significant body of people that's in your community. So Go ahead on that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, considering other people, considering the hurt, the pain, the brokenness that they feel. Here's the thing. I've probably passed Confederate monuments and things of that sort over the years and didn't even notice it.
Confederate flag.
Well, the Confederate flag
went past that and just,
I mean, but I would say it's in terms of monuments, first we'll deal with monuments. I'd love to come back to the flag, but in terms of monuments, yes. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't make me excited. It doesn't make me mad. It doesn't really do any of those types.
Robert E. Lee didn't aggravate you like he aggravated me.
Yeah. I mean, I was taught to love and respect Robert E. Lee. And so, and again, I can't, I don't know all the things about it. I do agree that it is treasonous.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he's doing it for a good reason, or what he feels like with his fellow Virginians, the fact of the matter is the issue that's on the table is the enslavement of humans. Mm-hmm. So, you pass by these things, and like I said, I don't feel something, but there are other people who they've had to see these for years, and they've been told the stories, and not just the stories from slavery, but also from the Jim Crow laws to the civil rights movement to, being profiled or whatever it may be. And all of that becomes a symbol, mm-hmm. And so in my opinion, my thing is, I'm okay if something's removed. Now, if a city says, you know what, we think this is not something that needs to be removed, we think this is being blown out of proportion, those are things they have to make. I'm not gonna go down and take a mob and try to bring it down. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if it's taken down, as a Christian, I'm a part of a different kingdom, mm-hmm. and my kingdom's not a Confederate kingdom. It's greater even than the United States. And in the end, that's what I live for. Mm-hmm. And, the flag is a really big, that's a big thing, the Confederate flag. When I grew up, the Confederate flag for me represented the Dukes of Hazzard. Okay, so I'm a kid, the General Lee, mm-hmm. you got the flag on the top, and it became a symbol for us, for many, or not everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but I think for many people, it is, you're a Southerner. You're just a good old boy, never meaning no harm, right? Mm-hmm. And, that's what it became a symbol of.
For you.
For me.
Yeah.
as I've talked with people and people of color, and I've listened to their stories, I would never allow that flag to fly in my house or outside my house.
Mhm.
I believe it is it has become, whether someone looks at it like the Dukes of Hazzard or not, it is a true symbol of division.
Mhm.
And I just think as Christians, a
Well,
human life
and
is more
let's,
important than a flag or a monument
mhm.
or something like
And it's worth pointing out that it hasn't become that. That's what it was. That's what it
Mhm.
started as. So
Right.
it
Right.
didn't, it hadn't become a symbol of division. It was a symbol of division.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't one of those things that people have decided to change the definition of a word to, to take it out of our vocabulary.
Right.
This is that's what it was.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's all things, and so yeah, there is some you have to evaluate it. I think if you're somebody who's a member of a community, you have to, in good faith, evaluate: is this really something that we want, that is causing some issues with a significant part of our people? Now, if one or two people don't run your community, they're not
Right.
going to, the tail doesn't wag the dog kind of thing.
Right. Right. I agree with
And
that
like
too.
you're pointing out too, if Richmond, Virginia wants to get rid of the Robert E. Lee statue, that's up to Richmond, Virginia.
Right.
I live in Vero Beach, Florida, and like
Right.
you're saying, if they do or they don't, that's their decision to make.
Right.
And that's a little bit of our tradition too, church tradition, right? We're autonomous.
Right.
And if Vero needs to do what Vero wants to do, and that's our community, and other places need to do what they want to do, that's their community. And I think one of the issues we face today is this social media, instant global media,
Mm.
such that they make a national issue out of a local issue.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I mean, these I was going to call them crazy people. I don't know if we're allowed to do that. Do I have permission?
Correct.
Do I have permission from you to do that?
Sure.
As
Sure.
my spiritual advisor. These crazy people in Seattle that have this zone they put up.
Yeah.
And
Chaz.
yeah, whatever.
Well, I think it's something CHOP now. Yes.
Yeah, CHOP or whatever.
Right.
We should be saying, okay, hey, if Seattle wants to do that, let them do it. If they want to have crazy people in this area, and what I think 3 people have been shot now in that zone.
I think there's been a rape and
yeah,
right.
But that's that's Seattle. If they want to try that, if they want to do that, if they want to let that happen, I'm not living in Seattle, and I'm not going to move to Seattle. And those people can, they want to let that happen, let it happen. Not going to happen in Vero. If we can help, but
right.
if we would do more of let them decide that and not
Right.
make it a national issue, we would be better off.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I mean, a lot of people are making some advancements here,
Right.
that is trying to bring peace to our nation. And I realize some people are not going to like it. I have great sympathy for Southerners and who do not see these symbols as a form of enslavement and things of that sort. I may disagree with them, but I also understand their thinking, and I really hope more people will really look into these things and see them for what they are.
Well, we as Christians would have a higher obligation to be aware of what the other person is feeling and thinking.
Yes.
We have that. We are definitely have that obligation. It's not about us.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we need to be unreasonable.
Right.
And bow to unreasonable demands, because we do live in a democracy and we do have input in certain things. But it also means that, like you're saying, we have to reasonably think of the other.
Yeah.
And what they're feeling and why they're feeling, and whether, if we feel like that other person is not not being reasonable in how they're thinking, then it's incumbent on us to go to that person, sit down and have a discussion about it and try to persuade them to why you think it's important to have this thing or that thing.
Right.
Or why that would make any difference if we changed it to something else.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
took, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And these are not easy.
No.
These are not easy. I mean, there's some that I think are pretty easy, but I think there's some that it becomes, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah. And we kind of showed those. Yeah. You've got on one side, you've got this, that's a pretty easy one. On the other side, it's a little bit, more difficult in evaluating that.
So Mary Gherkin says, after visiting so many historical places across the states, I learned the mistakes and or the good that came from the history that took place there. It was either something to never be repeated or to build from and go forward to a greater nation, a great teaching tool.
Right. And so that's the importance of history.
Yeah.
And so, you don't bury everything. It's just Robert E. Lee may belong in a museum about the Civil War.
Right.
Just like you saying that there's a museum in Alabama that has some Hitler stuff.
Right.
That you can look at and
Napoleon.
Yeah. And you can learn from that.
Yeah.
There's a difference between that and actually honoring that.
And that's what I would say. It's something, if something's used for honoring and it's a person who their work in life is not,
absolutely. Has not much redeeming value.
Yeah.
Or at least the way they're being portrayed is not what we want to highlight. And
honor. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I am on it. It's a tough thing. I think you and I both agree the way you don't do it is a mob mentality.
Right.
Because first of all, you're probably going to get a lot of things wrong. And the other thing is it's against the law. And I think as let's just talk from a Christian standpoint, we're supposed to obey the laws of the land unless, of course, it conflicts with our devotion to Christ. But I don't think a Civil War monument is one of those things. That's not one of those things where I think God would say, oh yeah, that's a hill you want to die on. And I just don't think it is.
Yeah. Unless you're just that really, 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 really conservative thinking of no graven images of any sort.
Well, you know what? There is something to that. Now, see, I know where you're going. You're going to try to tear down my Nick Saban and Bear Bryant statues there at Tuscaloosa, but this is not about this. We're talking about something else. Those
are very dishonorable.
Listen, I know. I'm waiting for Miami Dolphins fans.
You know that you have one of your coaches in that statue row.
Yeah.
Coach my dad.
Yeah.
When he played college football.
Yes.
At Duke University.
Was it Wade Wallace?
Wallace Wade.
Wallace Wade. Okay,
yeah, he is my dad's coach. At Duke
University. That was at Duke, though, correct?
At Duke University, yeah. He went to Duke after Alabama.
Went to Duke, yeah. So,
I have a family connection to Alabama of some sort.
You do, and I am sure.
Not proud of it, but.
I'm sure David Morgan would be very proud that you.
But it's my family. You have to deal with things in your family.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's important, for us to continue to have these kinds of conversations, and they're not always popular. I think the important thing is you count to 10 so that you can really make a good assessment. You do your homework. And then, if you feel like, hey, this is something that is offensive and it hurts people that I know and love, then, take action.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. I mean, look, I'll take action with you. I don't mind that. If you show me that this is something that is very hurtful, I don't have a problem with saying, hey, I'll sign that paper.
Yeah.
So because people are more important than a statute.
And we need to be a people who are careful what they're putting on social media, Facebook,
Yeah.
Twitter, or anything like that. I mean, you need to make a reasonable argument.
Right.
You don't need to attack somebody or a group of people or anything else. It doesn't need to be hysteria. It needs to be, if you have a reasoned argument, then you can make a reasoned argument. But we have to be careful how we come across and not come across as a mob.
Yeah, and I think as Christians, for me, we also need to make sure that if they looked at our body of work, is our greatest body of work for a kingdom of the world, or is our greatest body of work for the kingdom of God?
Right.
And that plays into a lot of how some of the decisions we make and how we treat other people.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Joe?
I can't. Well, sure. There's a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah, it's been a little odd tonight, you know.
Yeah,
going this route. And
but this isn't
find
bad
the right room
because I get to have Honest Abe with me.
Yeah,
so this is good. This is good.
This is not your graven image, is it? Just
yes, it is.
It is. Okay. Well,
sorry, I just have to confess that.
You just need to go ahead and confess, right?
I mean, I've got Abraham Lincoln hat.
I noticed that you got the shirt on.
Got the shirt on. He's my man.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We appreciate your patience with us being on a split screen, but Joe has mastered this Zoom Facebook. He's throwing up pictures and everything. This is huge.
Yes.
So
no church on Sunday at the building.
Yeah, no church on Sunday. If you know other people,
check your email.
Yeah, just want to make sure everything is safe before we come back and we do some reassessment. So just continue to pray for us. And if you have any questions, if you have anything else you want to discuss with us privately about the things we talked about here, we're more than open to do that. Because as we say, I think just about every time, we don't have all the answers. And we're discussing topics that are difficult, and there's a reason they're difficult.
And if you have some topics you'd like us to discuss,
oh yeah,
put them in the comments. We'd be glad to take it on.
Yeah.
We'll ignore the ones we can't handle.
Yeah, well, we'll give those to Darian, right?
We'll do that. Yeah,
we'll give it to Darian. We'll give her the hardest ones. So
that's good.
All right, Joe. It's good seeing you, and
good night.
Good night.